I'm Poppy Southcott. I am a senior enterprise security engineer with Cisco Meraki, where I lead development of our insider risk program. I am also the social justice co-lead of the Native American Network here at Cisco. So equality, diversity, inclusion are all really important topics to me. So I'm so thrilled to be speaking at a security conference that's focused on diversity and inclusion because God knows we need it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Clea Ostendorf. I was asked to join Poppy this week, and I am super thrilled to be part of this. I work at Code 42 as an insider risk advisor. My background has been a mix of sales, product management. I started in technology and IT recruiting, and that was eye-opening. And then, since then, I've been really focused on in the insider risk space. Which I think is a great entry point for anyone who's looking to get into security or maybe pivot into a different area that's slightly less technical, because it really focuses on people and building relationships and that energy that goes into making an effective program. And look forward to chatting with you, and please feel free to ask questions.
Thank you. So let's get started. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you about the basics of insider risk program management, and careers in this part of the security space. One thing I will say, it's a very broad space. There are a lot of different areas of focus and different approaches to dealing with insider risk in each of those pillars. I work for a technology company. Clea works for a company focused on data loss protection. So that is going to be the primary focus of the more technical side of this conversation, but it's not going to get terribly technical.
Yeah, and one thing to just add, as you think about insider risk or insider threat, they can be used interchangeably, and the scope of an insider threat program or an insider risk program can be vast, including workplace violence and sabotage, or it can focus more just on data loss or accidental exposures. So, whenever you think about a program, it's always good to kind of clarify what flavor or what's the scope when you're thinking about it.
I want to start with this statement. Preventing insider threats begins with an understanding that trust is not a substitute for security, and that people are an organization's greatest asset, but also the greatest risk. I have no idea where I found this quote, but it really spoke to the topic that we're speaking on here today. Because the first thing people hear when they think about an insider risk program is Big Brother, that they're spying on me, that it's something really negative, and it seems to be perceived differently than malware scanners. No one seems to get upset they have a malware scanner on your computer. But when it comes to insider risk, people are very sensitive, and as they should be. However, we're not Big Brother. We're not Santa Claus. We don't know when you're sleeping and care when you're awake. What we care about is protecting the company and protecting the data, and getting visibility into the actions happening around that data so that we can mitigate any actual insider threat events that do occur and hopefully prevent them from occurring in the first place. So what is insider risk? Insider risk is the potential for harm to an organization's data, systems, or operations by individuals who have authorized access to internal systems or data. The two important words in that paragraph are potential and authorized. And as we progress through this talk, we will get more into why those things are important. Because anyone who has access to company data, systems, or facilities is an insider risk, just flat out. This includes current and former employees, contractors, business partners, the people who you've contracted to bring your lunch to your office every day or make your coffee at the bar. But just because they are risks does not mean they are threats. And that's an important distinction to make, because it goes back to that bit we talked about earlier about how there's a sensitivity around these programs. Which is why we are going to be talking not just about the technical side, but really about the people side, because that's what's important to remember through this discussion. So why should we care about insider risk? So you can see on the slide, it says, the impacts of insider risk. There's financial, reputational, operational. So we all know those from working anywhere in security. You could lose money. There's the cost to mitigate. Your customers can be unhappy. You might have to provide them additional services to make up for the fact that you had some sort of event. Operational, downtime, supply chain disruptions. There are a lot of consequences to any security breach, and insider risk is no different. Where insider risk is more complicated is that you don't necessarily know what happens. Most companies, malware monitoring, all those sorts of systems are mature. They're well developed. You know when you've been breached. You know when you've been hacked. If your data has been stolen for ransom, you definitely know it happened because that's the whole point of ransom. The problem with insider risk is you may never know what happened because these are people who are authorized to be in your systems. They're authorized to view your data. They're authorized to access your facilities. So how do you know when they've done it in a way they shouldn't? So everyone is an insider risk. That does not mean everyone is an insider threat. What is an insider threat then? An insider threat is something very specific. It's a malicious action by an insider who has legitimate authorized access to an organization's network systems, facilities, data, who has intentionally exceeded or misused that access. Insider threats are criminal actions. They are malicious actions. They are not just something that occurs through carelessness or bad data hygiene practices. And they're generally divided into three areas of events. Sabotage of IT operations or systems, fraud, and data theft. Depending what sort of organization you work with, really impacts not whether you include these things in your program or not, because pretty much all three can touch every organization, but where your focus is. And a good example is, my company, Cisco Meraki, yes, we're concerned about fraud. Every company that does business, that does sales, is concerned about fraud. But if you're a bank, you are way more concerned about fraud. You're probably less concerned about IP loss. We are probably more concerned about IP loss. There's a balance between these things that will shift depending on what kind of organization you work on. There's actually sort of a 4 section 2 of national security risks and espionage. I didn't put this on here. I don't work for the government. I applied to the CIA as a grad student, but did not get in. That's not what I do, so I just left it off. It's not something you generally encounter in the corporate space. So what is not an insider threat? Exploitation of system vulnerabilities by external actors. However, if we were in person, I would ask you, doesn't even think of any caveats to that, so I'll just have to give the caveat. So the caveat there is if a person who works for your company, an employee, a developer, introduced a system vulnerability intentionally for exploitation by an external party, now you have a combination of an external threat and an insider threat. Phishing and social engineering attacks. So even though the employee might have taken action that negatively affects the company, it wasn't malicious, and it wasn't an attempt to intentionally exceed or misuse that access. Theft by customer site visitors. The other half of the definition is they have to be people who are trusted. They have to be people who have legitimate access. Malware, spyware, ransomware, we all know what that is. And data loss through negligence or failure to follow policies or best practices. The last one is important because addressing insider threats is only one piece of a risk management program, of an insider risk management program. That is talking about these last, actually most of these. Somebody who's been phished, who's been social engineered, who just simply overshared from their Google Drive or downloaded files to a flash drive and then dropped it at the airport. Told their friends about it over dinner, left their computer open at Starbucks. These things are part of an insider risk program. And this is why we go back to the original definition that everyone is an insider risk. Everyone has legitimate access. Everyone can do things in our environments that could have negative implications, even if they're not malicious. But you will often hear, like Clea said, some of these stories interchangeably. Clea, did you have any examples of malicious versus not malicious? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I forgot to put the slide in.
Sure. I'll tell a story related to HR. So this is a departing employee, which we always talk about as, one of the highest risks to an organization because they're taking data. So this was somebody in HR who, as they were leaving, downloaded the entire employee database of all the contact information, names, locations, salary information, titles, the whole gamut, and emailed it to themselves. So in itself, it doesn't seem like, it's intellectual property that's leaving, or it's really, that it's going to affect the business that much. But because of the nature of the data that left, the way it was done, and where it went, it became a larger issue. It became a data breach that the organization had to then recover from. Now, this employee didn't do it intentionally. They didn't intentionally. They didn't do it with malice. And so that was an interesting distinction, because they weren't doing it to then sell to a third party. They were doing it to leverage for their own benefits. So then the investigation team had to determine, and this involved legal and other HR members, as well as security, on how they want to respond to that. Is recovering the data just enough, or do they want to, take further action? In the end, recovering the data was enough. They didn't have to declare a breach. They kind of closed the lid, but it was a use case that they didn't see coming.
Thank you. And that really gets to it. So that sort of split the middle of, they took an intentional action that they probably should have been aware they shouldn't have done, but it wasn't malicious. There wasn't any intent of using that data. You can go completely to the other side, where people don't even know that they're exposing corporate data. iCloud accounts. People will log into the computer, log into their iCloud account, and everything starts backing up. Now you've had data loss. Like I said, flash drives, we covered a couple of those. Sales orbs, definitely. I always see a lot of concerns about client lists, customer lists, exiting, departing sales org members. In fact, I was a web developer in my early career, and one of my first tasks was director comes to me and he's like, we want to keep people from copying and pasting from the web browser. And as a developer, I'm like, I can't do that. That's impossible. They could go to the source code, they could do this. And a lot of what we ended up doing was in some ways theater. It just made it harder, but that matters. And we will get to that later. I'm trying to stay in order here. Okay, so if every person with access is an insider risk, why not just monitor every activity and lock it down? The answer is you can't. Oops, I'll go back to that name. Let me expand on this. So there are two pieces to that: locking things down and monitoring everything that happens. Locking things down is only practical to a point. People need access to do their jobs, and most IT organizations don't have a level of maturity enough to really grant access at a super granular level. Like, say, for instance, one thing we encounter a lot is people publicly sharing documents from OneDrive, from Google Drive, from Dropbox, whatever your cloud file management system of choice is. There's an option to share with an individual, to share with your company, and to share with the entire world. So my first reaction when I heard about that was, well, why don't we just disable that feature? Why would anyone ever need to share outside of our organization? Well, they do. Customer support needs to be able to share files, diagnostics, sales needs to be able to share presentations, product, engineering goes to conferences like this. They have security decks that they might want to share. There are actual reasons to publicly share documents that are viable business concerns. That applies to almost every control you might want to put in place. There are tools, and Code 42 is one of them, that allows you to have some of that granularity, put some of that control on specific actions. And that's good if you have a tool like Code 42 that can really drill in granularly and look for specific events. But if you're just working with the Google configurations, the Slack configurations, it's too broad a brush. And when you start doing these things, people start looking for ways around them. And that's the last thing you want, because for the 1,999 innocent people who are just looking for ways to do their job and share their documents, that one person who's malicious is now hyper aware that he has all these restrictions and he has to find another way that you may not be observing. And that's why we get to this. An effective insider risk management program fosters a culture of awareness and responsibility without Orwellian surveillance. And that's exactly it. We're talking about all those. I think I have the statistic further down, but out of 1,000 employees, less than 1% are going to have any malicious intent. I think I saw 69% have some sort of accidental, unintentional, or unaware event. So the best protection you can give in your organization is to foster a culture of awareness that people are following your policies, following your best practices, doing what they need to protect your data, and hopefully prevent you from ever having insider events, will still allow you to detect that 1% who are actually malicious.
I sometimes like to think about it as like guardrails for your employees, right? You have to understand, what are their normal business activities, and then how can you, as a security team, put guardrails around it that's still going to allow the collaboration and the innovation that people demand, but also either provides you the visibility and then a path to respond, or a way to continuously educate them as you go.
And I may be jumping ahead because I can't remember whether I put this slide in, but that's a really important point that I want to address. So we're both talking about making sure that any security controls you put in place don't prevent the business from getting done. So how does that happen? In a lot of security approaches from a purely technical standpoint, and that's where the discussions about controls comes in. But in reality, this is a business problem to solve, and this is a people problem to solve. The two most important things you can do in an insider risk management program are to convince your workforce to pay attention and do the right thing, and to understand your business. And that's where the soft skill jobs come into. You don't have to be, we'll get to this later, jumping ahead. You don't have to be an engineer to work in insider risk, because a large portion of your job is going to be going out to the business and seeing how do you work, gathering requirements, talking to stakeholders and finding out what they need, where those threats are. If you don't know where the threats are, if you don't know where the data of concern is, if you don't know where the sensitive parts of your supply chain are, you won't be able to protect it, because you may be looking over here when the actual thing that the business wants to protect is over here, and that's not going to work. So a huge part of this job is understanding that and drilling down into what your organization actually needs. Do you need that fraud protection? Do you need to focus on data loss? It really is about understanding your business and understanding the people in your business and building those relationships. I think I jumped ahead. Okay, so we talked a little bit about what insider risk is, what insider threats are, how they differ. When you're building a program, you can sort of divide your activities into sort of 6 pillars. Policy and governance. So this is really what will prevent future insider incidences, especially non-malicious acts, from becoming events. These are where you're setting your policies, you're setting your procedures, you're saying how you should handle data, like don't download PII information to your laptop. That would be a very basic procedure, but it's not something you can easily enforce. And that's back to the buy-in and education. I can put a policy in place that says don't download data, don't download personal information, to your private devices, and I can even put some controls on, but if people aren't aware that why that's a problem. And it's a problem because if you don't properly handle people's personal information, you can get fined. They're going to find ways to do it anyway, even if it's just taking a picture on their phone and using it like that. Education awareness, which goes to the sixth pillar right here. I'm jumping around. Detection and response. Something happens, you need to figure out how it happened, where it happened. I saw the previous talk was dealing a bit with that. Some of the earlier ones have too. Detection and response, at least the response part, tends to be very similar. The detection piece is much more complicated. When you have malware on your system, you have tools that can spot it. You can compare to hash. You know what it is. You know whether you've seen it before. You know it's happening. With insider risk, I said this earlier, you may not know. An example that was just sent to me the other day was a woman who worked at a bank. So employee, no reason to suspect she had any grievance. She didn't know misbehaviors, no red flags in any way, shape, or form, but she was targeted by outside agents and pressured to download confidential information and print it. So she downloaded it after hours, printed it all out, and handed it off to the external threat actor. That's hard to detect. You might not even notice with a standard detection system. And this is why I really like insider risk, because it's a puzzle. How do you solve this problem? Well, you could have tools that detect printing. Okay, can detect large amounts of printing. You can detect off-hours printing. So now you're starting to build this series of events. This is not even detection chain, I guess would be a better word. A series of events that when they are all true, then you might actually have a problem. So, okay, she printed a bunch of stuff, but stuff she's allowed to have access to, not a problem. Okay, she did it after hours, kind of weird. She doesn't usually work after hours, but is that really a problem? But if you can chain these things together, and there are tools that can do this, then you actually start to be able to have true visibility into events that are happening in your org. And that's the detection piece. Paired with monitoring. Data loss protection. Ideally, you can prevent data from moving outside of your boundaries in the first place, because it's all well and good to find out it happened, to find the person, to handle that person in that event, but if the data's already gone, the data's gone. So one of the things you want to do is know when your data is moving out of your boundaries, encourage people not to move out of the boundaries. And that requires a lot of data processing, a lot of monitoring. Identity and access control, not really going to go into it here, but making sure that the right people are doing the right things and accessing the systems they're allowed to access. So you're talking about, least privilege, granularity of rules, all those sorts of things to make sure that you only have access to the data you need to do your job. Because any more than that, you're expanding your insider risk. So as a human, you're an insider risk, but you only have access to the small piece of data. So not as big a risk. But if I don't have role-based permissions, if I don't have granularity, if I don't follow the practices of least privilege, then now you have access to the entire org. And that's a problem, because if you are a bad actor, then now you can do a lot more damage than you did if you could just do your one limited role. Risk assessment. This is what goes into what I was talking about earlier, is you have to know your business. You have to know your stakeholders. If you don't know I already covered this, but if you don't know your business, you can't accurately, with high fidelity, find these insider threats. Because the one thing that there is in all of these, in this topic, is a lot of noise. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of false positives, and really trying to narrow that down and increase the fidelity of your alerting, it's one of the biggest challenges.
Pavi, I want to just go back to that slide for 1 second, if you don't mind. So if you look at all of these elements, this is so much more than just a tiny program, insider risk. I mean, every single one of these elements is really critical to have an effective program. And an insider risk program, I think, often is not made a top priority for organizations, because we trust our employees, we have to solve other things first, we have external threat actors. But look at all of these elements that go into an insider risk program. that the insider risk program is almost the overarching element to validate that these are working, that the controls are in place, that everything is humming together, and it's doing so in a way that's built around trust and the culture that you want to foster. So, not to overlook that insider risk is much larger than just taking a few bad apples. It's a truly comprehensive program. Sorry, keep going, Poppy.
No, thank you. We have lots of time. And actually, what she's saying is it actually goes back to that bank example I gave. That person in that example was not a threat. They were targeted by an external actor and pressure was put on them and they became a threat. So it's not about trust. That woman was a victim, and like I said, back to the data hygiene, the phishing attempts, the social engineering attempts. Those are not bad people. They are as much a victim of an external actor as the company, but you still need the insider risk program to detect them. So these are the elements or some elements of a puzzle, the puzzles I was talking about earlier. Is how do you say whether this is normal activity, unusual activity but not a threat, or an actual threat? Some of the red flags you might look for are unauthorized access attempts to systems and data outside of job requirements, unexplained behaviors, behavioral changes. Notice there's a theme here. People doing things differently than they don't normally do, because generally these are people you work with every day. They are not people who are showing up once and causing a problem. So you're looking for what changed. They've been here for 3 years, or all of a sudden doing things differently. Why? And repeated violations of policies. So triggering events, negative performance review. I'm not going to read the slide, but there's 1,000 things that can indicate that you might have an issue in your org. But does an elevated risk mean an actually malicious insider threat? No. Less than 1% of potential threat attempts involve an actual malicious insider threat attempt. And in everything I've investigated, I have never actually encountered someone malicious. They exist. They definitely exist. But most things that come across are innocent. It's either someone just trying to do their job. At a previous company, we downloaded our website backups to an external drive. Would have triggered 1,000 red flags, but that was just the best way they felt to do their backups for disaster recovery. These all have to be conversations. And I'm trying not to get ahead of myself in my slides because I forgot something on my previous slide. What Clea was saying about insider risk programs not being a priority or people not understanding the value, look for partners. Look for those engineering teams who want to protect their IP, those sales teams who want to protect their client lists or their pricing models. Legal. So sometimes you'll see legal investigations in e-discovery as part of an insider risk program. Personally, I think they're really more of other programs that are supported by insider risk programs. But especially when it comes to fraud, they have a vested interest in making sure fraud is caught. So they can be really great partners. One partner I don't like to engage with, or not even one partner, because you do have to engage them, but I personally don't do HR requests. I don't care if you're watching YouTube all day on your computer. I don't care if you're showing up to work. I don't care if you haven't opened your laptop in 3 weeks. Technically, I suppose some of the tooling I use could be used to determine that, but I have a support of my org to draw a hard line against that. We are not here to police employees and employee behaviors. We are here to detect threats to the company's existence, and existence isn't exaggerating. And my personal feeling is that if you start expanding the scope of your program beyond that, you're weakening your program because now more people are aware of it, more people are pissed off by it, more people are going to look for ways to work around it. So I have no idea how I got on this tangent, but that's one line I personally like to draw. And you may work in an organization that's not true. You may not have a choice, but yeah, that's like that. Oh, well, that didn't transfer well to the platform. And that was actually a good lead into considering ethics. So I actually will read this one because it's not very visible. I think it says, always remember the humans involved are, okay, that's what it says. So always remember the humans involved in a potential insider threat event are likely not malicious. I know I've said that like 5 or 6 times, but it's really, really important because this goes back to what is our goal here. And I feel when I get an event that my goal is to actually prove that they didn't do something bad. I'm not the police. I'm not looking to prove that someone violated policy, lost data, was a malicious actor. My best day is when I can prove that they're not. Because these are your teammates, these are your colleagues, these are your partners. Presumably, they wouldn't have been hired if you didn't trust them, if you didn't like them, if you didn't want to work with them. You wouldn't sign contracts with your partners or your vendors if you didn't trust them or work with them. So what changed? What changed between when you made those agreements and you hired them into your teams, and you brought them into your life, and you go to the bar after work with them, or to their baby shower? What changed? Probably nothing. They probably still are that trustworthy person. They probably are still that friend that you work with. So keep that in mind and don't go into these sorts of investigations looking to prosecute. Go looking for what changed and why this person who probably is harmless is showing up on your systems. So when you're developing an insider risk program, you really need to keep in mind the ethics of it. So privacy. You have to ensure you're in compliance with all the privacy laws and minimize the collection of personal files. This goes back to sort of that iCloud example. No matter how much you tell somebody, they're going to do personal things on their work laptop. Wherever possible, you want to avoid interacting with that, looking at it, downloading it, saving it. Yes, if you have an actual threat event, it might be valuable information, but everything in between there, you don't need to know. So some things are odd. So I did have one person who was like changing the file extension on a PDF and doing a lot of other really suspicious things, just short of naming his file exfiltration data .jpeg or something. And I still to this day do not know why they did it, because what it was their mortgage documents, their closing papers for their mortgage. I have no idea what that person was thinking, but it raised 1,000 red flags on some personal data. It was very definitely personal data. So privacy, don't intrude on it. Proportionality. The technology available can be used to focus on monitoring for red flags. You don't monitor everything. If there's too much data, it's not possible. Even with AI machine learning, it's just not possible. So make sure you're reacting appropriately to actual events and not to everything that comes across as odd. 1, you'll wear yourself out. 2, you're playing Big Brother again. 3, it's just not practical. Sorry, I can't read that slide. I don't know why I didn't upload. I forget what's on the slide. There it goes. It's all pretty in PowerPoint. Necessity. Again, this ties into privacy. Only gather and review the necessary information. If you're pairing with an e-discovery team or a legal investigations team, this may not apply because they may need to get everything. But if you're a security person investigating an insider risk event, only gather what you need to know. You can always go back later if you have the right tools. It's important to have the right tools. You can't do this job without the right tools. Transparency. Establish and communicate clear policies for the scope of your monitoring. Let people know what you're doing. There is sort of a balance here. If you tell people too much, then they'll be more aware to work around it. But people need to know. You need to disclose that you're doing this, and we generally all do in our privacy policies and all the corporate documentation we sign on. But it actually helps foster a culture of security awareness to let people know that you're watching, that these things, we have these policies you should be following, or every time you have an event, you'll get, oh, I didn't know that was a policy. Oh, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. That's really the most common answer. And respect. Always act with care, compassion, and respect for their feelings. Like I said, these are your friends. These are your coworkers. These are your fellow humans who just deserve that kindness, that consideration, because you are investigating something that could damage their career. If you make the wrong call, you're hurting a human. Don't do that.
We call it empathetic investigations, because so often, when you're coming from other worlds within security, you are used to saying, oh, this is a threat actor, this is a bad, something malicious, let's just, throw the books at it. When you're dealing with your peers and your friends, like you were mentioning, Poppy, it's a lot more nuanced. One thing that I've seen work really well is having a chain of command. If this is my peer I'm investigating, who can I send this to so that I don't have that implicit bias? Or if you don't feel comfortable investigating executives or the C-suite, if you see something, who do you want to send it to do that deeper dive? Maybe you don't feel comfortable, or you shouldn't have access to the potential data or the files that they're looking at. That's another way to go about it.
Yeah, I've definitely escalated things to my manager that I wasn't comfortable doing because it was a friend or it involved topics that I wasn't comfortable dealing with. But that's an important point, is what does respect mean? It means, for me, I always look for why this is happening as opposed, what changed. I'm looking for reasons to explain this away. I don't stop there because you don't want to miss something, but that's the approach I go into. This person didn't do anything wrong, so why are they showing? We also don't take drastic action unless there's a reason to. We do have processes and policies for high-risk events, for emergencies, for clearly something bad is happening here. We need to take measures. But the first response is not to cut off their access. It's not to reach out to people directly. It's to look at what other data we are seeing and make sure that we actually have something to investigate before we even start raising the red flag. Because if you go to the person, they are malicious, so now you're alerting them. If you go to their manager and they try not to have done anything wrong, well, depending on the manager, that could be held against them. And I would hope that no manager at my company, I would never work at a company that I was aware had managers like this, would hold something against somebody like that. But it could happen. We all have bad managers. And I was at a conference recently and actually learned that apparently, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm told in some European countries, if you go in and you just cut somebody's access, you've now de facto fired them, and you're subject to all the fines from not following due process to fire them. Don't know if it's true, but I've heard that now from a couple different places, so I suspect it is. But that's never how we approach it. It's never just, oh, hit the button and cut them off. We want to know what happened. We want to know why, what changed, what is this person going through that led to this? Maybe it was a momentary thing. I don't know. But that's why I said earlier, although I don't like to use the insider risk program and insider risk tooling to deal with, non-performance issues with employees. We do partner with HR and employee relations to make sure that if somebody does have a grievance, if somebody is going through a lot, that they have support in working through that, whatever the next steps might be. Okay, so why should you consider a career in insider risk? There's a lot of potential in this thing. Solving for insider risk is essential to avoid catastrophic financial, reputational, compliance ramifications. Okay. As Clea said, historically has not been a major focus of a lot of organization security programs. It's always lived in security, but tends to be off to the side, smaller program, fewer people. But, and I got these from, what was the source of this? Oh, the annual data exposure report from Code 42. Surveying company executives, 30%, 32% average increase in the number of insider-driven events they experience per month. Basically, this is a lot of statistics that say insider risks or insider threat events are escalating. There are a few reasons for that. One is historically there wasn't a lot of attention paid to it. Now there's more attention. Historically, there weren't a lot of great tools. Like I said, this is a very hard puzzle to unravel, which is why I like it. But without tools that can help you do that, there's just too much information, too much noise. So now we're more able to detect it, increased visibility. There's increased awareness of insider threats. Work from home has created a lot more opportunity to behave in ways you may not if you were every day in the office. A lot more opportunities for misunderstanding, which can lead to grievance. There's a lot more going on in the world. People are just more than happy because, things still aren't great. But the conclusion is, of all these interviews, this is a growth space. That sounds terrible, but it is. So why did I want to bring this talk here, actually? Like I said, diversity and inclusion are near and dear to my heart. I'm a firm believer that people need to be champions, not just allies for diversity and inclusion. If you're just a cheerleader, you're not doing anyone any good. You actually need to go to events like this, be on stage, and you can tell I'm not comfortable public speaking. Be on stage and show people that there are opportunities for diverse viewpoints within the security industry. And a lot of D&I efforts focus on recruiting from the already available pool. You get hit up on LinkedIn 1,000 times a day, and they're always like, oh, we have great diversity and inclusion. But everyone's always trying to recruit those people who are already doing it. If you want to be a true ally, a true champion, you have to help other people develop. So we have more diversity in the space and more people to choose from. And that's why I'm here and why conferences like this exist, is because we need more people. We need these perspectives. And we've all seen the studies. We all know this. We all know diversity and inclusion leads to better outcomes, period. We all know that it creates stronger companies, more profitable companies. We know it's a good thing. But it's super important in this type of area because, back to the theme we've had through this whole conversation, this is about people. You have people's careers in your hand to a large degree. Most people are innocent. All those things that we talk about, their perspective needs to be understood. I saw a colleague actually get walked out of the office, and thankfully nothing came of it once, but a couple companies ago, because on their work from home days, they were logging in from a lot of different locations. And this is pre-pandemic. When we were working from home, we were expected to be at home. And they were logging in from different locations because they had kids and they were out there with their kids every day. Yes, they shouldn't have been doing it, but it wasn't like they were, this is back to that whole HR thing that I don't like dealing with, but they weren't malicious. They were just trying to live their life. And now things have softened. Hopefully it wouldn't be like this now, but I like to feel that if I was there, I would have said, hey, wait, maybe she's just doing school pickup. Let's take a step back and see, is this really something we even need to investigate? However, if they had logged in from, Russia in the morning, Australia in the afternoon, we might have something to investigate. We definitely would. I read something about, it's important. I'm trying to think of a good example, but I'm going to give an example from a previous job that's not insider risk related, but why you need diverse perspectives, because it just so speaks to me. We were working on a job matching engine, and the business rules that we were supposed to implement said that if you had any work experience older than 5 years, we're going to ignore it. We're not going to look at volunteer experience. And if your resume doesn't have a job that has valid work experience and newer than 5 years, we're not going to look at your resume at all. It's an invalid resume. This went through 1,000 rounds of business review, developer review, a bunch of people, all men. I walked into the room. My first thought was, well, wait, so parent has a child, takes off 5 years until their kid starts kindergarten, they're now no longer employable? And the answers were like, well, we find that people who, the most placeable people are people who've had jobs in the last 5 years. I'm like, this is wrong. um, Not relevant to this, but it's the first thing that came to my head as to why diversity matters. Cultural sensitivity and understanding. Other countries may work differently. Other cultures may work differently. Other communities in the United States may work differently. 15 years ago, if you were running an insider risk program that for a company based in New York City, and you had a dev team out in Silicon Valley, and you see they're not logging in until 10 a.m. and they're logging out at 11 p.m. outside of work hours would have been a red flag. But we all know that's not the way we worked, and now it's not the way anyone works. Mitigating bias and discrimination. Again, go look at the studies. We all know this is true. People are harsher on people who don't look like them. I'm just going to say it. Like, if you don't look like somebody, especially if you're from the dominant group, you're going to be harsher. You're not going to give the benefit of the doubt as well as, and I'm not attacking anyone or criticizing anyone. There are studies. We all know this. I'm not going to pretend they don't exist. I'm not going to both sidisms it. We need women. We need minorities. We need people of color. We need LGBTQ. We need everyone in this space because we need those people to act with empathy. We don't want to be, the Texas police. Okay, so prioritizing diversity and inclusion creates programs that effectively address insider risk will protect the integrity of the organization and well-being of employees. I just said all that. I don't have anything else to say on that. So, careers in insider risk program management. I know this is a dense slide, but I wanted to get this all up here because. So when I was, and spoiler for the later part, I did not start my career in security. I did not start my career in IT operations or law enforcement, which are the two big paths into insider risk often. IT, people actually, managing the endpoints, managing the hardware that we work on, and law enforcement, cops, FBI, CIA. Makes sense, but if you're going back to this empathetic model, yes, you need those skill sets, but you also need a whole lot of other skill sets that don't apply to either engineers or law enforcement in most cases. So I made a little chart here of like what your background might be and how it might fit into the program requirements for an insider risk program. So marketing communications. Insider risk programs cannot exist without executive support, executive buy-in, for funding, obviously. And like we mentioned, it's not something that's necessarily always gotten a priority. Somebody has to convince them, and that's what your marketing people are for. We need you to market these programs as valuable. Business analysis and requirements gathering. We touched on that. If you don't know how your business works, you can't properly protect the data. If you don't know what's valuable, you can't protect it. Security awareness training. I forgot to mention this. We sort of did touch on this, that you need a culture of security mindedness. That doesn't just happen overnight. It doesn't happen because you're transparent or you say you have to do these things, you set these policies. You actually have to train and educate people to know what they are, how they follow. You can say, don't share data in unsafe ways. Well, what does that really mean? When I'm sitting there looking at my Google sharing options, okay, so I'm pretty sure I shouldn't share publicly, but I need to share with more than one person. Do I have to pick each person individually, or is it okay to share with my whole org? These are the sorts of questions your education and training programs will answer for people. Data analysis. Identifying patterns and indicators of risk. Like I said, a lot of noise, red flags that don't necessarily mean anything, red flags that really aren't. All that comes down to data analysis. One of my tasks is to take a big data dump and see what's going on in it. Legal, human resources. We touched on compliance. We touched on lawsuits. We touched on privacy violations, employment violations. Obviously, there's a place for legal and human resources. You tend to work with those teams more directly. But if you were looking to make a transition, you're bringing valuable skills to the actual program. Program project and program management. It seems self-explanatory. I'm a firm believer you need process people. Like, no org can be complete without strong process people who understand what we're trying to achieve and help us get there. Project managers are my favorite people on earth. Writing. Policy creation and documentation. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. A lot of people don't write in their jobs. And it's not just because of a technical job. I actually told my nephew that even though he's a computer science major, he has to learn to write because he'll spend a lot of time writing and not actually coding in an actual corporate job. But there are a lot of jobs that don't do a lot of writing. If that's your strength, there is a place for you in this world. I can't think of anyone I've worked with who couldn't find a place in this world and couldn't be helpful in some way. So. Okay, so we are on the future track, and this was sort of a last minute addition, so we did sort of end up here. But I get this question a lot. What about AI, machine learning, generative AI? How does that fit into this world? Well, the obvious thing is I've talked on a lot about how there's a ton of data. Oh God, I'm running out of time. Am I out of time? Okay. There's a lot of data you have to process. There's a lot of puzzles that have to be solved. You have to chain things together. That sort of analysis is perfect for AI machine learning. Like they can take in that vast amount of data, spot patterns, spit it back out to you. Okay, so why do we need to exist? Why can't this all be automated? Because, well, AI simulates human intelligence, our problem solving, our puzzle solving. They can take a vast amount of data and see more than we could possibly see faster. It can only mimic human empathy. ChatGPT can say, oh, I feel so bad, you're having a terrible day, but it doesn't actually mean it. It's not going to action on it. It's not going to take that into account when looking for answers because it doesn't actually know how you would feel. So there is a future for AI machine learning within this space, but AI cannot determine intent. It doesn't know why these things happened. It doesn't know what changed. And AI isn't ever going to react, hopefully, with true human compassion, kindness, and understanding. We need people, and we need people from diverse viewpoints, from diverse backgrounds, who are focused on the human side of insider risk. Oh, my career journey. Okay.
I don't know, moderators, how are we doing on time? I think we might be maxed out, but...
Okay, I think we are. I'm sorry, I did not watch the clock. I'll just go through it very quickly. So I was one of these transition people. I started life as a web developer. For years, my friends were trying to recruit me to security. And my answer was always, I'm not a hacker, I'm not a hacker, I'm not a hacker. I don't have a place here. But I went from web development to business analysis, which was requirements gathering, stakeholder wrangling, project management, understanding the product, understanding the business that we do. And I was able to transition those soft skills into this role. Sorry, this was supposed to be a longer point. I dragged Clea here to do this part, and I talked too much. So, any quick questions? We have 3 minutes.
Okay, while questions are percolating, I want to just throw one kind of call to action to the group. So we taught, like, this is a female focused conference, or diversity and inclusion focused conference. So it's nice to talk about this stuff, but how do we actually apply it in our day-to-day jobs? And so I want to challenge everyone, myself included, that when you get a ping from somebody who might not be your, we'll say, if you get a ping from a sales rep, a female sales rep, or a minority sales rep, why don't you take their call? Because especially this audience, we know how much harder it is to break into certain fields. So I encourage you to give that person a chance. Same thing if you have the opportunity to hire somebody who might not be as qualified, but you might be helping them break back into the job market, just like Poppy was mentioning. Give them a chance. I think action starts with us, and it's more than just talking about it. It's also actually doing something about it.
I was out of the job market, and someone gave me a chance, and I was promoted 3 times in 3 years. Until I was the senior person in my organization. It was an excellent hire for them. But somebody else would have looked at my resume, our system would have looked at my resume and said, oh, well, she hasn't worked in 5 years. So why would I hire her? Why would I talk to her? Well, talk to her, find out what her skills are. Don't just assume that, I have too much to say on this topic. I have a few minutes left, so I'll just stop. Okay. I guess we don't have any questions, so I hope this was informative. I forgot to put a resource slide on here, but there is an interesting book by CERT, CERT, that goes into a lot of this topic. And Clea, what's the President Code 42 CEO wrote a book? I liked that book.
Insider jobs. And by the way, this was not a vendor focused,
No.
but I do appreciate all the nice comments.
Um, that is a good book. And it's not a promo advertising piece. It's really interesting. It says some interesting stories in it. So give it a try.